Welcome to the Creator's Journey with the Halfling and the Spaceman. We love talking to creators about their journeys, and we are happy to be chatting with Malory today. Malory is an epic lit RPG writer, as well as he writes progressive fiction, and we will find out a little bit more about what both of those are. His latest book, The Weird Map in Mr. Glimm's Skull, was released back in December of 2025. So welcome, Malory.
Very nice to be here. Nice to meet you too.
Well, it's great to have you with us, and we appreciate you having patience while we work through the technical issues.
The inevitable technical issue.
Yeah, we tend to say that a lot, and unfortunately, but it's great to have you with us, and we will go ahead and just dive right into it. So the first question that I have is sort of a just tell us a little bit about yourself, about your formative years, and what drew you to actually becoming a writer.
I've always written, and I think to start off with, I was an English teacher, so I was able to use that and enjoy talking about words and being in the classroom, really. But then I started to find that I was finding a bit more of an audience for my stuff. And starting, I wrote plays, and their plays got put on, which was quite nice. Then I had some short stories that got published, and that again makes you feel that people do want to read what you're doing. And then I started, a friend told me about a website called Royal Road, which is a website where aspiring writers really can put what their latest work in progress online, and then they get a lot of feedback from the millions of authors that there are there, and they really do give you some feedback, and very forthright feedback that you have to cry quietly about for a little while you try to get over it. But I found that really useful because everyone always tells you you're great, and I think when your wife likes your work and your parents like your work, you think, well, that's nice, but will anyone ever actually buy it, really? And then being on Royal Road was a really eye-opening experience because I started to get some really quite decent critique over what I was doing, and I started to realise what I did that worked and what I did that didn't. And then I was very fortunate that a publisher got in touch via Royal Road, and I was able to start doing this full time. And really, since then, I've been able to get quite a few books out there into the world, which has been great. And the book that we're going to talk about is the first thing that I've written to really make sure that my son can read something that I actually write, because he's 8 years old, and a lot of the destroying of orcs and blowing up of space battles that I do in my own fiction isn't really that appropriate for him. So I wanted to write something that he could take to school and be proud of, really, and that's where that book came from that we're talking about.
Okay, all right. Well, so writing is full time for you now, is that right?
Yes, I've been doing it full time for 2.5 years now.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Spaceman?
Mallory, for those out there in our audience who might not be familiar with the genres of lit RPG and progressive fantasy, can you tell us a little bit about what those things are?
Absolutely, they're quite similar, really, and I think if you think of them as flavors of the same sort of thing, you won't get too far wrong. Really, what lit RPG is an attempt really to bring the sort of experience that people have playing computer games into literary form, really. So lit RPG is literary role-playing game, really. So what you generally have is a protagonist that's usually a younger male, and something occurs that means that they're no longer within their own world anymore. So in some of those things, they get isekai'd into a different world. So it could be that they're killed in this realm and they wake up in another one, or they get pulled in through a portal, or in my example of it, Merlin from the past grabs hold of someone and pulls them back to Arthurian England. But that's usually how the story starts. That's usually chapter one. And then as the story develops, it's that character developing powers that are almost unique to them within that world, so that they're able to have great impact really on the world that's around them, kind of like you'd see in a computer game when you were leveling up through it, where you get more and more powerful as the story goes on. And certainly my writing works within those worlds where characters develop and get stronger in very measurable ways and very explicitly measurable ways by the actions that they do, so that the characters are rewarded in very measurable terms for their successes. And that, I think, has found quite a big audience of late, where certainly the feeling amongst the audience is that not a lot of fiction really exists to sort of reward meritocracy and reward doing good hard work. And across the lit RP genre, really, you see characters that, by making the right choices and doing the graft and doing quite focused work, they're able to build up their own success across the story.
So so you use the term leveling up,
Mm.
as in the games
Yeah.
that people play. It, is that something? Is that a term that you actually use in your books? Do you
So
actually?
that's probably the big difference between lit RPG and progression fantasy. So in lit RPG, the maths is almost entirely explicit. So there's a huge amount of numerical data, a huge amount of tracking progress in a very level one, level two, level three sort of way. Lit RPG books are quite long. They're often between 140 and 200,000 words, because they're packed with these tables and this data. And the really successful ones have pages upon pages, really, of mathematical information about what happened across a chapter, mirroring a computer game, really.
Uh-huh.
Progression fantasies would not have the numbers in, so it would have the same sort of experience, but is a much less stat heavy sort of read. So I think for people that are very into computer gaming, lit RPG tends to be something that speaks to them more than progression fantasy. Whereas progression fantasy has a much more feel of sort of anime fiction, or that sort of more Eastern influence with cultivation writing, where characters are growing stronger, but not in a numerically measurable way, more in a sort of passing through thresholds kind of way.
Well, so I have read that you spent. This is kind of getting on a different track now, but I've read that you have been rereading that you've been rereading Terry Pratchett,
Yes. Yeah.
which we are both huge fans of. And so I could not blame anybody for rereading Terry Pratchett. It,
Ook.
exactly. Uh, so is he your favorite author,
Yeah.
or do you
Uh,
have a
we
favorite author?
Yeah, without question, I think Pratchett's always been my favourite author. I think I came across him I think I was 13 when I first read The Light Fantastic, and I think that was that sort of set the tone really of everything that I look to write. Really, I think the omniscient narrator. I think the idea of the sort of very dry sort of sense of humour that undercuts everything. The fact that you can have really big stakes for your story, but make it very comfortable and very enjoyable as well. I think that's a huge part of certainly all of my writing, and I think the humour is real. I've always found really important. So I think that's a thing that I really like to ensure goes through all of my work, is that slightly irreverent silliness, the surreal feel to
Yeah.
things as well.
All right, I have a Pratchett question. If you had to choose between the witches, the wizards, or the City Watch, which one would you choose?
The City Watch every day. I've got. I don't know if you can see the picture that's just behind me. It's a still from Where's My Cow. It's the one of the original drawings that were from it that I bought for my son. So yes, Captain Vimes, I think, is who I would like to be. I think is
Yeah.
is a good one.
Yes. I kind of felt the same way. He asked me that a long time ago, and I kind of had to mull over it just for a minute, and then I came up with, City Watch. But
Yeah,
all the characters in his books are just
absolutely.
phenomenal.
I,
They
I'm
they
I'm
really.
sorry. I'm a cheery little bottom fan. That's
Hey,
my kind of woman.
Certainly have the beard for it. It's
All right, Spaceman, get us back on track.
Okay, I can't sit here and joke about Terry Pratchett. Well, I could. I
We
could.
could do a whole episode on Terry
We
Pratchett,
could. We
but
we could do a deep dive on Moist von Lipwig.
yeah.
absolutely.
All right, so moving on to a more practical question. You've mentioned Terry Pratchett. What are the other influences that inspire your writing and sort of drive the things you create?
I think it's a slightly weird combination, really. But when I was at university, I became really quite obsessed with Raymond Chandler, and I think everything about the way that Chandler created his work, with the speed of it and the focus on the importance of generating text in a very fast way in order for things to work. And I think that sort of hard boiled, stripped back quality to it is something that again I find really really interesting. And I think trying to combine that sort of feel to the fiction where it's fast and it's spare and it's really engaging, but having that undertone of the humour as well. I mean, some of Chandler's metaphors are fantastic, where they just do the massively elongated, humorous metaphors within a very violent setting, really. So I think that sort of mixture between Chandler and Pratchett would be huge, but Woodhouse as well. Douglas Adams, Neil Gaiman, I'm a huge fan of. So I think all of those sort of slightly mythical sort of views of the world and the importance of the city as well. I think that's something that I think's really important in writing is that you get a really powerful setting, and I think Chandler does that with LA, and Morpork is such an important part for Pratchett as well. And I think if you get your setting right, then readers buy into it and really like that establishment of a world.
Well, I think that's an interesting mix of, influences there. I mean, they all everybody that you've mentioned has something different to
Yeah.
offer in their writing. So I think it's really cool that you can combine some of those elements. So that's cool. Kudos to you. Uh, well, I mentioned at the top of our interview or chat conversation, whatever you want to call it, whatever we're doing today. I mentioned that you had a book that came out in December, The Weird Map in Mr. Gl-
Glib.
Thank you. I was about to say it. Skull.
Yeah.
Um, can you give us the elevator pitch for that book? Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so Raconteur Press have got a big push at the moment over boys' adventure fiction. So they very much put a call out for people to write stories that were very much focused on mid-grade readers, so young boys really about the age of my son, where you had something that had real good stakes to it and pace to it, where the boys were able to solve the problem themselves. So yes, there could be adults in it, but they didn't want the adults to be the saviors. That they wanted the boys to be able to figure out the danger. They wanted healthy family dynamics, and they wanted a real sense of like an old-fashioned quality to it, really. And those are the books that I love. I mean, I grew up with the Hardy Boys and with the Famous Five and all those sort of rippling yarns, really. And that's where the story comes from. And the idea of it really is that you've got a young boy who's moved to a new village. He's the new boy in school, so he's a little bit isolated. He is very, very clever. He's got a father that does something quite mysterious that the story develops as it goes on. And he is found hiding really in the school's basement, fiddling around with a radio by the school's caretaker and Mr. Glimm. And Mr. Glimm says, "Well, I'll take you under my wing a little bit and try to help you fit into the school." And then the next day, Mr. Glimm's gone, and the story really launches from there as to what's happened to Mr. Glimm, where has he gone, and what's happened to him. And as the story moves on quite quickly, he has been murdered, and they find his body, and he's got a contraption connected to his head, and the contraption is plastering out a map of underneath the school onto the wall. And the two boys are then chased by the people that had done away with Mr. Glimm down into the basement of the school, and the adventure moves on from there into an old Russian listening station that was underneath the school, and or the various very sort of gothicy, horror-y things that happen there. But it's written for 8, 9 year olds, so there's lots of peril, but mild peril, and it all works out well in the end, and the boys save the world.
That's awesome. I'm glad to see that Raconteur is doing this because
Oh,
I,
fantastic! Yeah,
I think that boys fiction has been missing for a few years because a lot of the YA fiction is
not
chosen one stories. And if you look back on, say, Robert Heinlein's Juveniles,
yes,
they were
yes,
all ordinary
yeah,
people in extraordinary
yeah,
circumstances that step up.
yeah.
None of them were the chosen one. And I,
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. I really
And I
appreciate
think that's such an important feature, isn't it? Because if you're trying to read something that speaks to you, you don't need to read about somebody that was chosen by destiny to be the greatest of all people that was ever. You need somebody that is going to be like you, don't you?
that's exactly right. That's it.
That-
And hard work and perseverance pays off.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, not always, but generally.
it I think it's safe to say that it's worth it to to work hard and to persevere. And I love this story that you've laid out for us. Um, because they did have to work hard. They did have to persevere
Yeah.
to figure out what was going on, and eventually save the world, as you say. So very cool, very cool. I'm excited that that's come out. And like Spaceman was saying, we need more books that speak to to young boys, or middle-aged boys,
Hey,
and
I'm a middle-aged boy.
characters that they can relate to, and can get immersed in their adventures and all of that. So well done, well
It
done.
also has to be, it also has to be fun. I think so much young adult fiction is quite murky and quite weighty and quite traumatic. And I think just having things that are fun to read is a good in itself, to be honest.
I want to ask you, and again, we're kind of switching gears a little bit now, but I want to ask you about your process for writing. How did you develop your writing skills? Did you take classes? Are you part of writers groups? Well, you did mention that you had several people that read your stories and so forth. But can you elaborate on how you've developed your skills over time?
But I think the starting off point is to be a reader, isn't it? I think that because I was an English teacher for 20 years, and I think you read so much, not just the stuff you're teaching, but the stuff the children write, and the things that you want to put in front of them to help them develop. And I think that's the most important thing, is that you read before you do anything else. And then when I started putting pen to paper, really, you've got a huge bank, really, of things that you've read that work, and things that you've enjoyed, and things that you'd quite like to have seen versions of, and they sort of start coming out and appearing on the page. And then, as I think I mentioned at the start, the thing that really kick-started me doing this as a living was Royal Road, and I think the nature of that as a website is that it encourages pace, because they want you really, the model really is you publish a chapter a day. So to be able to generate a chapter a day, you have to be able to be fairly committed and fairly clean as well when you write, because you can't spend hours crafting something, then spend hours editing it, then spend another hours redrafting. And I think that sort of element of Chandler was important, the speed and the pace of it, and then reflect on it once it exists, rather than endlessly correcting. And I think that happens a lot with people who want to be writers, is that they endlessly correct page one because they want page one to be the greatest page one that has ever been published in the history of writing. And then you never get on to page two. And I think that's such an important thing, is that you go for it and you push forward, and then you look back once you have something out.
Mhm. I think you're absolutely right, and we have heard that before.
Mm.
People get so
Yeah.
obsessed about making it perfect, and
Yeah.
then they never
No.
get it finished because they're just always obsessed about.
Yeah, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the
Yeah.
done.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
I have that as a sign up in the office that I write in, because that's the biggest danger, isn't it? Is that and then you get bored of it because you've spent so long perfecting it that you've had enough of it and you just want to put it in a drawer and never see it again. So yeah, I think it is that I think Royal Road conditioned me to speed, and needing to get several thousand words done a day. And that was when I was working full time as well. And then I think once I was able to do this full time, being able to then say, well, this is now a full time job. So I can't have days where I don't want to write anymore and just think, "Oh, I just want to go and do work in the garden for the afternoon." It is a full time job, and you need to write full time if you're going to do it. And I have a certain number of words I have to get done, and they need to get done before I do something else.
That's awesome. I mean, I understand. One of the things that I've had a colleague who is a couple of years ago had his first novel published, but we were working together at our day job, and he lamented about not having time to write, not having time to write, not having. And then he retired, and he had a hard time finding that discipline.
Yeah.
So that you have to have that discipline if you're going to be a full-time writer.
Yeah.
Mallory, now is the most important part of this interview. Absolutely most important. Tell everyone out there, both our viewers and our listeners, and all the ships at sea, where they can find out about you and all the things you've written.
So I am Malory author on pretty much every social media you may possibly want to find. So I think on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, on TikTok. Apparently, that's now a thing that you have to do if you want people to find you. Um, um, but yes, so I think if you've got any social media interest at all, you'll find Malory author, and I'm on all of those. Raconteur Press. I've been very fortunate that most I've had stories in most of their collections of late. So if you like to have a read of Raconteur's anthologies, which are a really good pulp injection of fantasy and sci-fi, you'll usually find one of my stories in there, and I think they're pretty good at giving you a flavour of my writing.
All right, very good. Well, we will make sure to get that in the show notes so that people can find your works and enjoy your writing, as I'm sure they will. Uh, but we are about out of time, so I want to thank you so much again for joining us this afternoon, taking the time, and especially for putting up with the technical issues there at the beginning. But but thank you so much. We have really enjoyed talking with you.
It's been great to talk to you too as well.
Yes, and we want to also thank all our audience for joining us today. And we hope you've been inspired and entertained by today's guest, Mallory. And this is the Spaceman for the Halfling and the Spaceman podcast. Over and out.